Ship 20 successful cryogenic proof test. Hey guys, welcome back to Tech Power. Ship 20 by SpaceX has successfully completed the cryogenic proof test. Let's dive into the video to know the details. On Sunday night, 10th October 2021, the first full SpaceX Starship prototype, Starship SN4, had a cryogenic proof test at SpaceX's launch pad in Boca Chica, Texas. The supercooled proof is among the initial evaluations required to verify the vehicle's airworthiness. With an A-hit check, the SpaceX groups will now paint in the area of a static firing, implying a leap to 150 meters. SN4 is the successor of the Mk1, SN1, and SN3 spacecraft prototypes. Any unsuccessful cryogenic evidence at trial is added to the entire scale above. According to cryogenic evidence, the Starship is filled with liquid nitrogen to check that its tanks can survive flight pressures. By Sunday, the most feasible spaceship prototype to avoid cryogenic testing had been designated as SN2. The SN2 was, however, more valuable as a partially constructed tank section than as a whole vehicle. With the failures, the SN4 charge was both literal and symbolic enough to pass cryogenic testing. Surprisingly, that is the first time that SpaceX has placed the primary orbital expansion Starship, Ship 20 or S20, using conventional cryogenic evidence, which fills the rocket with hundreds of stacks of liquid nitrogen to imitate its explosive fuel. But there is no way to draw any conclusions until the public returns to the platform to snap photographs, or CEO Elon Musk goes to Twitter to announce the results. The first cryogenic test of Ship 20 looks to have been a huge success. Compared to almost 3 dozen cryogenic tests SpaceX has performed over the previous several years, with various prototype spacecraft, rockets, and tanks, the first big look at Ship 20 still has some peculiarities. Historically, every cryogenic test of a fully functional prototype spaceship was aesthetically distinct and utterly unforeseen. Without straightforward insight from SpaceX or Elon regarding the goals, plan, or schedule of the tests, how to search for the tests via informal webcams, of course, and attempting to perceive why things appear this same way they do, or what happens every second, is a relic that tries to interpret eroded hieroglyphics. Cryogenic tanks experimentation, whether with Starship, Super Heavy, or a look at liquid oxygen, LOX, and hydrocarbon, LCH4, or impartial liquid nitrogen, LN2, tanks and fuels, it's quite easy at the most basic level. The vehicle is linked to pad systems and is partially or completely charged with cryogenic liquids. The automobile runs out of gas as soon as preferred places are reached or attempted, fuel, tired, or LN2. LOX and LCH4 or LN2 spaceships are filled with the thin metal tanks they contain because they are relatively cold, 160 to 200 degrees Celsius or 260 to 330 degrees Fahrenheit. Because a gaseous chemical is significantly less dense than its liquid counterpart, the charge in Starship's constant tanks can soon become unmanageable. Even after a tiny quantity of boiling, like all other rockets, Starship purges the fuel that develops from time to time to maintain the precise pressure in the tank. And he brought 2 crucial approaches for deciphering the cryoprotected hieroglyphs: frost stages and ventilation. The Starship's S20's first cryoprotection was unique in comparison to earlier prototypes. Around 8 p.m. CDT, SpaceX began charging the rocket with liquid nitrogen. Their LOX bottom and CH4 top tanks were gradually filled to their maximum capacity of around 30-50% in the next hour. Instead of emptying the fuel, SpaceX partly exhausted the methane tank while also serving the LOX tank before the LOX tank was left entirely full of over 24 hours or much less, occasionally filled with boiling liquid and occasionally with nitrogen. Even the finest tank guards were tricked by several big wells over 4 hours after testing. Then, about 4 hours after the LN2 began charging, Starship finished several huge holes. Given hours of testing, the vents might have been dumping fuel, which the Starship's tanks effectively depressurize when they weary of the liquid. On the other hand, the vents matched the fast charging of 1 or several hundred more LN2 batteries, presumably filling out the Starship S20 in the process. Around this time, SpaceX probably began to emphasize some of the ship's 20's cryosecurity, completing largely the missile vents and allowing stress to slowly rise to flight levels and perhaps higher bursting. Musk uncovered a continuous 6-bar or 90 psi stretch effort several months ago as SpaceX was diving into the cryosecurity of huge main Starship prototypes. Starship was finally tested efficiently over 8-bar or 1100 psi, providing a comfortable 30% safety margin. Ship 20, being a prototype main orbital augmentation Starship, may wish to reach tank pressure more than anybody else to survive its first orbital discharge and subsequent re-entry to orbital velocity. September also achieved a milestone by being the primary provider for performing a cryogenic test with full thermal protection. While it is impossible to know how effectively the S-20 15,000 thermal protection tiles performed, public camera viewpoints did not reveal any visible signs of tile breaking and falling as Starship continuously cools and heats, contracting and expanding as a result. In addition, when in contact with air, the pores and skin of the metal tank beneath most of the tiles on boat 20 may have been coated in a coating of frost and ice, but the heat shield believed it could handle that extra unseen difficulty. Dozens or heaps of tiles may have been jointly battered, chipped, or broken to spread on Lab Padre or NASA spaceflight webcasts, but that may be revealed or denied more practically when the street reopens and neighborhood photographers higher up can make judgments. At present, it looks like Ship 20's first cryogenic test was a huge success. Perhaps this will open the way to putting up Raptor and testing a static kitchen shortly. Meanwhile, SpaceX is working on several activities at Starbase, like the new integration towers. The Starship's short spreader arm and chopsticks are meant to grab the very heavy rocket booster upon landing. According to several accounts, a squad of SpaceX engineers is continually working on the chopsticks, although Elon Musk has indicated that there is no assurance that these super heavyweights will be apprehended. The enjoyment of this entire performance is assured. Like many other SpaceX fans, I have faith in Musk here. The widely anticipated Boat 20, loaded with liquid oxygen LOX and liquid methane CH4, will first shake her 3 Raptors at sea level, which are seen by an unmanned control with 3 RVACs. The most practical RVAC, on the other hand, went off at any time, and all these tests were performed on SpaceX's McGregor website rather than Starbase. As Ship 20 travels toward targets just on the suborbital platform, Booster 4, just around the block of the Orbit Launch Facility OLS, will take a similar path with the data checking targets coming first, as a result of static fire categorization. Surprisingly, the Booster 4 evaluations can be influenced by the usage of OLS Tank Farm, which has been constructing raw material tanks for the previous few months. On Monday, when all tanks save one ground support equipment GSC tank were put on the internet, the evidence was already checked on many of the tanks and varied vent ratings were discovered. All that is left is for GSE-8 to roll, as shown during the transfer of the last cryogenic projectiles that insulated the tanks. On Saturday, more smaller tanks were discovered on Highway 4, which explains why SpaceX may examine spacecraft 20 first, as it is being inspected before the OLS terminal is complete. Booster 4 has spent the last few weeks demonstrating the process fixes at the OLS site, while the paintings in the launch tower remain. While coupled in super heavy, this paint shielded the quick disconnect QD extension installed to supply fuel to Starship. This arm may also provide strength and communication weights to the boat and balance the stack it comes with. The launch tower will stack the ship with gigantic chopsticks in the booster through as part of the Mechazilla mechanism. This device's installation will be completed within the following several days. To place these massive components on the tower, SpaceX opted to remove the Booster 4 from the bracket, providing for more clearance and avoiding the possibility of colliding with the Booster 4 during difficult lifting procedures. After Mechazilla has been completed, huge hands may be checked before a full WDR, wet dress rehearsal with Ship 20 in Booster 4. Mechazilla's especially endearing job of capturing automobiles that return to the launch website after the flight is unlikely to be examined at least until Booster 5 and Boat 21 fly. These standard compliant vehicles are already being manufactured at the facility, with 5 thrusters already stacked in high bay. TPS process application manufacturing speed was largely aligned in production tents with numerous running segments and tip cones, some of which may already be in situ. And that will be it for today. Stay tuned and subscribe for more videos.